I'm from Cleveland originally. Worked quite a few other places. You know, I was probably just like a lot of other people from Cleveland. Hated Cleveland, had to get out. And I was lucky enough to get out and explore the world. I traveled a lot and lived a lot of other places, and then got a little bit older, not old, but you know, around 23, 24, I started looking at ways to move back to Cleveland. And you know, quickly realized that Cleveland's a pretty awesome city. And ever since then, you know, I kind of have taken it personal if someone says, you know, Cleveland sucks or anything like that. So, you know, the identity of Cleveland CycleWerks is very much Cleveland. And that's why I gave it the name. I mean, it kind of embodies the city. You know, we're making bikes, which isn't all that glamorous. It's hard work in factories and a lot of welding and a lot of, you know, you're dirty all the time. So you know, everything about motorcycles that we're building kind of embodies Cleveland. And you know, in the beginning, we tried to get everything done here, but it was very, very difficult. And you know, of all places, we went to China to get things done. And you might say, well, Cleveland CycleWerks, you're making stuff in China. But you know, we're at a stage right now where we're big enough where we're starting to bring a lot of that work back to Cleveland. Cleveland CycleWerks really embodies what a new, you know, what a new American business is. We didn't follow the traditional business structure. Hire a secretary, hire a CFO, hire a marketing exec, you know, get 15 million in investment. We're very much a ground-up company. So, you know, for the first, actually up until just a few months ago, we ran everything out of, you know, our house, out of other people's shops. We did everything we could to be very conservative, you know, fiscally very, very conservative. So, you know, Cleveland CycleWerks really embodies that Cleveland spirit. I mean, we're not Beverly Hills, we're not overly flashy, and we really tried to keep our cost in line, so we kept control of the whole company. So my partner and I, we own the company. We don't have any investors that we have to, you know, bow to, and you know, I think what you'll see is our bikes will be very unique. They'll still retain our vision, which are, you know, very clear, very clean, minimal, classic, you know, classically styled bikes.
So this is like basically starting up a business out of a garage, in a sense.
Yeah, and we didn't even have a garage to start with. It was starting out off my kitchen table, and really, you know, what people that don't actually make things with their hands don't understand is that Cleveland has an incredible amount of people who make things. So if you need to find someone, if you're not an expert at stamping, you could find someone who stamps. Or if you're not an expert at welding or bending or whatever, there's probably someone here that can do it. You know, still people who do casting, sand casting, die casting. So, you know, the incredible thing is, even though we had a really hard time finding people to manufacture things, it was pretty easy to find people to help us with prototypes. You know, I'm a designer, so I am not a, you know, a master welder, master fabricator. I can do that stuff, but when we really needed a master, you can find them all over Cleveland. The Chinese entrepreneur is hungry. They have a thirst for manufacturing, and they want to make things. And they also are very open to a young guy coming in and saying, hey, I want to do this. Whereas in the US, there's so much resistance, especially in Cleveland. And you know, Cleveland's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of people who make things, but it's very old school, very traditional. You know, most CEOs, most people I meet with are in their 50s. And when they see me walking in, they're like, well, where's your dad? Or they think that this is like, I'm just there until the CEO comes in. So it's very hard for people here to understand that there's young people that are doing some really interesting things. China, I would walk into a room and I would give the boss of the factory an idea. And he'd say, oh, this is awesome. And he'd bring 15 people in, and we'd have a serious meeting right then, right there. And he'd say, okay, well, how do we move forward? And to me, it was refreshing. It's like, wow, that was strange to me. Having all these people, when I presented ideas, saying, yeah, let's do it. And I kind of imagine that's probably what the US was like back in like the 1900s to 1920s. I live manufacturing every day, and I get plenty of people that are, oh, they're so upset that we're building stuff in China. But the reality is, China helped us buy this building. You know, China's helping us employ almost 100 people in the US. And that's what I really want people to understand is there's so much more besides the actual person just making that part. There's assembly, there's distribution warehouses, there's the dealerships, there's the online retail, there's the numerous distributors. We have 10 distributors in the US that just distribute our parts. So there's a whole, there's a whole industry that goes around manufacturing. And the parts we manufacture in China help us be able to manufacture parts here. You know, there's always going to be the person that says, oh, I want it all made in America. Well, guess what? They go buy the $50 part that's made in China because that made in America part's $300. So I've seen plenty of people, once we make our part in the US, they say, well, it's too expensive. And they go buy the made in China part. That same person that will, you know, castrate us and say that we are, you know, the bane of society. And that's really what I want people in Cleveland to understand is that, you know, this company is really a global company. We sell bikes in Japan, in the US, Canada, South Africa, all over Europe. I mean, we're starting distribution in Russia. So, and you know, that money all comes back to what we're trying to do here, manufacturing in Cleveland. It's always been part of the plan to manufacture in Cleveland. And actually, it's kind of interesting how it has worked because we really couldn't get any traction in Cleveland for the first year. You know, I look very young. I mean, I'm quite a bit older now, but my partner also looked very young when we started this, and people are like, well, you know, it was, you know, the depths of the recession, and everyone over here was like, yeah, no, we're not interested at all. Or, oh, we're interested, and then we get into it 6 months, and it'd be like, well, the liability is too high, or there'd always be some excuse as to why we couldn't get it going. And then once we started getting articles in CycleWorld, you know, Hell for Leather, Crane's Cleveland Business, even some of the people we went to in the beginning called us and said, holy, I'm sorry, I can't put that. They said, you know, holy cow, you actually did this. And I said, I told you what we were doing, and we wanted you in on the ground floor, and you chose not to be in when we started. And I said, well, we want to do it now. So like, we almost had to prove to Cleveland that we could do it before people were willing to accept that we could do it. It was very strange. So the plan has always been to manufacture here. And you know, one of the manufacturers, actually two of the manufacturers that gave us a lot of help were HMF. So HMF does primarily, they do mostly their own exhausts, but they have capabilities to do any kind of tube bending, welding, any kind of fabrication. So right off the bat, I proposed to Hans, the owner of HMF, what we were thinking, and he was all over it. He was excited. So, you know, props to HMF for helping us out. And another company was Leroy Thompson. So Leroy Thompson Manufacturing, they said, we get it, let's do it. So now we had a company that's doing a lot of, you know, bending and welding, and then we have Leroy Thompson's doing a lot of machining for us. And we've given them a lot of business because, I mean, they were willing to work with us, and you know, we're sticking with them, and that's been extremely successful. So it's always been a plan to manufacture in Cleveland. It's just been finding people that are willing to work with us, really.